Hello and welcome to Astromantic. This is part 1 of a companion video to my Astrology Coordinates video, in which I explain the ecliptic and equatorial systems astrologers use to obtain the celestial longitude and latitude values of planets. Among other things, I discuss the aspects of declination, parallels and contra-parallels, having to do with planets' similar locations above or below or on opposite sides of the celestial equator. Please watch my Astrology Coordinates video first if you don't understand what I'm talking about. In this video, I discuss 5 of Vincent van Gogh's declination aspects. I interpret parallels like conjunctions and contra-parallels like oppositions, but really it's the condition of the relevant planets, their rulerships, and their place in the chart that determine how the energies manifest. In the Part 2 video, I examined Trump's chart and his declination aspects. I use the tropical zodiac with Placidus and whole sign houses, since these different house systems add helpful layers of meaning to a chart. The post-impressionist artist Vincent van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853 in Zundert, Netherlands at 11 a.m. In the aspect grid for his chart, his declination aspects are on the right and his longitudinal aspects are on the left. I've listed Vincent's declination aspects here, starting with the tightest orbs first, and you can see that 5 of them, 1, 5, 7, 8, and 10 as I've numbered them, do not aspect each other by zodiacal longitude. If you were analyzing his chart looking at just the longitudinal aspects, you'd miss out on the information these declination aspects provide. The other declination aspects all aspect each other by conjunction or opposition as well, emphasizing those planetary associations in his chart. I'm delineating just the first 5 declination aspects here. So let's get started with Vincent's Sun-Pluto contra-parallel. It's not only the tightest declination aspect in his chart, it's the tightest of all his aspects, including the zodiacal or longitudinal aspects, so it's important. The Sun in a chart is the natural signifier of the father and authority figures, while Pluto represents extremes, power, and intensity, among many other associations. This Sun contra-parallel Pluto, then, brought challenging issues of power and control into Vincent's relationship with his father and authority figures in general. And in fact, Vincent's relationship with his pa, as he called him, was difficult, especially in the last few years of his father's life, though Vincent strove early on, at least, to please him. Theodorus van Gogh, called Doris, was a minister in the Dutch Reformed Church, just like his father, Vincent van Gogh. Vincent was the eldest surviving son and had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. I say surviving because Vincent's older brother, also named Vincent, was stillborn exactly a year to the day Vincent the artist was born, bringing an association with death, Pluto's domain, into his life from the get-go. The moody, melancholy Vincent was sent away to a couple of boarding schools as a child, where he was deeply unhappy and felt abandoned. He later described his childhood as austere and cold and sterile, and under the influence of the black ray. He mostly blamed his father for this, since he said his pa embodied the black ray. The term is from Victor Hugo's last novel, published in 1874, called 93, set in 1793 during the French Revolution. As Vincent explained, a person under the influence of the black ray is out of touch with the soul of modern civilization because their traditional prejudices stand in the way of understanding eternal truths, which may only be discerned through nature and those who are true to their own consciences, and not the dictates of so-called polite society. His pa's belief, he said, were based on a system and conventions, and he failed to wrestle with the naked truth. As the eldest son, Vincent was expected to set a good example for his 5 siblings. But from the time he was a child, Vincent was the black sheep of the family, defiant, sullen, and contrary. His parents constantly prayed for him to be normal and not bring shame on the family. There is and always will be something strange about him, his pa said, and his mother added, he is so awfully impractical. Vincent had several jobs before he became an artist, and he either quit or was fired from all of them. He went through a pretty extreme evangelical phase and was fired from a 6-month trial position as a lay minister in an impoverished Belgium coal mining town for ignoring repeated admonitions from the church authorities about his undignified conduct. He'd given away his clothes, food, money, and lodgings to live in solidarity with his flock. His father tried to have him committed to a lunatic asylum around then, since the emaciated, dirty, and disheveled Vincent appeared totally incapable of taking care of and providing for himself. This led to a huge fight between them. His father was something of an autocrat, thin-skinned and short-tempered, and Vincent could be relentlessly argumentative and obstinate. In another big fight with his father a couple years later, after Vincent had abandoned organized religion and was again living at home, he refused to go to church at Christmas, so his pa kicked him out of the house. Vincent recounted, I was angrier than I ever remember being in my whole life, and I told pa plainly that I found the whole system of that religion loathsome. I don't want anything more to do with it and have to guard against it as against something fatal. He said he thought his parents' sermons and ideas about God, people, morality, virtue, almost complete nonsense. But a couple years later, Vincent was back living with his parents, and he and his father were again at each other's throats. After a few months, Vincent moved his art studio out of the vicarage where his parents had made room for him to a bigger studio in town, where he had more privacy. His father wrote to Theo, his middle son, who was sending Vincent money every month to support his artistic career, since Vincent was making no income of his own. Pity that Vincent doesn't join in anymore. It's as if he's increasingly becoming estranged from us. His short temper prevents any talking, and that in itself is enough to prove that he isn't normal. A month later, his father died suddenly of a stroke at age 63 when he walked into the house on the evening of March 26, 1885. Theodorus van Gogh was buried on March 30th, his son Vincent's 32nd birthday. Transit Mars, ruler of Vincent's Aries sun, had just entered Mars' sign of Aries that day and was sextile to transit Pluto, now at 0 Gemini in Vincent's 12th whole sign house, activating Vincent's Sun-Pluto Contra-Parallel, connecting his father with Pluto's underworld realm. Let's look at the condition of Vincent's sun. It's exalted in Aries and is also a triplicity lord, so has very good essential dignity. And in the Placidus and 10th whole sign house, it has very good accidental dignity as well, reflecting the elevated status of his father in the community and indicating that Vincent himself would come before the public in his career, which he was starting to do right before he died, and of course decades later when he became world famous. The Aries sun rules both his second and third Leo Placidus houses, and just the second in the whole sign system. The second has to do with one's money or income, while the third rules one's siblings, communications, neighborhood, and pre-college schooling. So with an exalted sun, who was also a triplicity lord in his 10th house of career and ruling his second, why did Vincent have lifelong financial problems? And why did he struggle so much in his career? For one thing, the sun is not well integrated in his chart. It makes no aspect by longitude to any other planet. Some astrologers think an unaspected planet acts like a wild horse because it's unconstrained by other planets that would regulate its energy. Vincent could be quick to anger, impulsive, and hard-headed, which made things difficult for him as an employee. He said, "I, for one, am a man of passions, capable of and liable to do rather foolish things, for which I sometimes feel rather sorry. I do often find myself speaking or acting somewhat too quickly, when it would be better to wait more patiently." Vincent's sun is ruled by Mars in creative Pisces, also in his Placidus 10th house, and the whole sign 9th house of religion and long-distance travel. Mars is on the midpoint of his sun in Neptune, with Sun representing ego and vitality, and Neptune the renunciation of the ego, dissipating energy and confusion. So Neptune would inject some fog and probably delusions into desires and life path decisions. Reinhold Eberton says that in some cases, Mars on the midpoint of Sun-Neptune has been found to indicate epilepsy, which is interesting since that's the diagnosis Vincent's doctors gave him after his first serious mental attack, which I'll go into in a later section. In the Placidus house system, Aries Sun and Pisces Mars are both co-present in the 10th, focused on his career and status. But in the whole sign system, Mars in the Pisces 9th makes no Ptolemaic aspect to Vincent's Aries Sun. However, Aries and Pisces have equal rising times when they pass over the ascendant. So through the traditional rule of Contra-Antitia, they share sympathy, and Mars is able to see and manage his whole sign Aries house. The problem is, Mars is at the out-of-sect malefic in Vincent's day chart, so he's going to cause problems for the sun. In terms of sect, Vincent's sun seems to be in good condition since it's in haze. It's the day luminary in a day chart in the top southern hemisphere, and a masculine planet in the masculine sign of Aries. All good. But note that his sun's sect condition is also this other word that looks like Munakara. It's pronounced Moon Kai, following the Punjabi pronunciation, according to the preference of astrologer Joy Usher, who's written and spoken about Moon Kai in several places, including on her own sites, atinyuniverse.com, and in her books and articles. Usher explains that her main source is the medieval astrologer Al-Biruni. As Usher notes, Moon Kai, also called contention, is an uncomfortable planetary condition that results from the double crossing of planetary sects of a planet's dispositors. This is a traditional astrology principle that uses traditional sign rulers. For example, the sun belongs to the day sect, but in Aries, like Vincent's sun, it's disposited by or ruled by Mars, who's in the night sect. Vincent's Mars in Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, a day sect planet, who's in its own sign of Sagittarius. This double switching or crossing of sect boundaries 2 times by dispositors, in Vincent's case, from Sun, day sect, disposited by Mars, night sect, who's disposited by Jupiter, back to day sect, is very uncomfortable for that first planet in the chain, his sun. As Usher writes in her blog, Munakara gives us the idea of the dangers of crossing boundaries twice and the trouble a planet can get into when it moves through our enemy territory. The planet feels like it has its back against the wall and will behave in a way that shows its more extreme qualities. The planet in Munakara is wary or hypervigilant, according to Usher, and experiences a sense of chaos or instability, because its dispositor, who's supposed to see to its needs and watch out for it, is itself not being well looked out for, since its dispositor is also from the opposite sect. So a planet in Munakara or contention is going to feel under threat for the things it rules or represents. In the table Usher provides describing a Munakara sun, she says the person experiences perceived or genuine attacks on their opinions, integrity, or reputation. They have trouble setting goals and maintaining focus. They fear criticism or humiliation. Vincent did have trouble setting goals. He failed at one job after another before he finally decided at age 27 to devote himself to art. In terms of being able to support himself, you could say he failed at his art career too, since for most of the 10 years he was an artist, he sold only one painting. He took some formal art classes but clashed with the instructors. He also felt attacked when they and other artists criticized his work. He even ended a years-long friendship with the young painter Anton van Rappard, who disliked Vincent's first major painting, The Potato Eaters. Van Rappard said of the lithograph, "You'll agree with me that such work isn't intended seriously," and then went on to detail what he thought were its numerous technical faults. Their friendship fizzled out entirely after this. So though Vincent's sun had good essential and accidental dignity, his sun's Munakara sex condition wasn't cancelled out by the fact that it was also in haze. His sun's dispositor was the out-of-sect malefic Mars, who contributed impatience, abrasiveness, and bad temper to Vincent's personality, and his sun's total lack of zodiacal aspects probably made him unaware of or unbothered by just how rude he came off to people. Which brings us to the tightest aspect in Vincent's whole chart, his sun's contra-parallel to Pluto. Pluto's in his 11th Placidus and whole sign house, to do with groups, friends, organizations, and benefits or perks from the career. It's at 0 Taurus, ruled by artistic Venus in Pisces, who's in his Placidus 10th and conjunct Mars in his 9th whole sign house. With respect to getting along with others, Vincent said, "I don't enjoy company, and dealing with people, talking to them is often painful and difficult for me." His mother thought this was because, as a child, he refused to visit others in the community with the rest of the family, and so he missed out on learning how to be sociable. But with intense Pluto, independent, eccentric Uranus, and serious Saturn in his 11th, he would find it difficult to relax with people and chit-chat. He said, "Like everyone else, I have a need of relationships, of friendship, or affection and trusting companionship." At the same time, he was not one to sacrifice his principles or his opinions to fit in with the crowd, and his penchant for arguing drove many people away. "It's hard for me to be content with conventional friendship," he told his brother, "precisely because I seek and persevere in sincere friendship." The sun's contra-parallel to Pluto added an underlying intensity and a sense of suspicion and paranoia to his sun's Munakara wariness. We can see how this Pluto aspect affected Vincent's otherwise unaspected sun, making it even more unbalanced by adding this polarizing element of extremist tendencies, manifesting in his life as power struggles with his father, authorities, and friends, and making his school years bleak, lonely, and unhappy. Pluto also rules great wealth, as precious gems and minerals are hidden under the ground in Pluto's realm, among them coal. It's significant that it was in the impoverished, soot-covered coal mining district, where he was most miserable, lonely, and poor, working as an independent evangelist for no salary, that Vincent finally found his life's calling, his son's true purpose. He had experienced the depths of humiliation and failure again and again, until he found himself completely alone, estranged from his family, in despair, at rock bottom, in Pluto's desolate, bleak, lonely realm. And it was there, among the coal pits, that he decided to become an artist. His solar arc sun was on his natal Uranus then, and his solar arc Pluto was sextile his natal Mars, ruler of his sun, so a sudden transformative career change was in order. The last 10 years of Vincent's life, spent as a painter, were made possible only because of his complicated, close relationship with his younger brother Theo, who supported him financially and emotionally, linking those two Placidus Leo houses, the second and the third. To Theo, he poured out his thoughts, feelings, and creative progress in hundreds of fascinating, eloquent letters. So Sun contra-parallel Pluto didn't deny the promise of Vincent's 10th house success, his stellar artistic reputation, and great wealth from his career. All that happened, but after his death. The one who deserves much of the credit for that is Theo's young widow, Jo, for her tireless energy and shrewd managerial and marketing skills. She edited, translated, and published Vincent's letters to Theo and others, and devoted her life to nurturing the art world's respect and the public's enduring love for his beautiful paintings. In this, she represents 11th house Pluto's dispositor, exalted Venus in his whole sign 9th house of publishing, the turned 7th house of partners from his 3rd house of siblings. Jo helped achieve for Vincent and her husband Theo lasting admiration and worldwide fame. Next is Vincent's close Moon-Jupiter conjunction and parallel. Jupiter's associated with long-distance travel, religion, literature, and philosophy, as well as good fortune and gurus or teachers. It's the day benefic in his day chart, so it's primed to do its best for him. The moon rules emotions, early childhood, the physical body, home, security, nurturing, and mother. As queen of the night, she's the out-of-sect luminary in his day chart. Both are in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, making Vincent open-minded and eager to explore the world mentally and physically. Jupiter is also the traditional ruler of Vincent's midheaven at 22 degrees Pisces in his 9th whole sign house of long-distance travel and religion, and Placidus 10th, linking his career to Jupiter themes. Vincent certainly did travel for his career. He went from Zundert to work in his uncle's art dealership in The Hague when he was 16, and was transferred to the London office when he was 20, then to the Paris office where he was fired in 1876. Then he went back to England, first to Ramsgate, then Isleworth to teach at a couple of boys' schools, then went home to Eton, where his father had been transferred, then worked at a bookstore in Dordrecht in 1877 when he was 24, but quit that, then moved to Amsterdam for 15 months while he studied to get into the theology program at the university, but quit that plan, so went to Brussels to attend a shorter training school for evangelists, but was dismissed after 3 months. So he went to Wasme in the Borinage to work as a lay minister, but was fired from that job, so returned to Eton, where his father threatened to institutionalize him, so he fled back to the Borinage, to Quesme, to be an independent evangelist, where in the late summer of 1880, he finally gave that up and declared himself an artist. Then he went to Brussels to study art, then home to Eton again to draw, then to The Hague to get some instruction in painting, then to Drenthe to draw and paint, then home to draw and paint in Nuenen, where his parents had moved and where his father died in 1885, then to Antwerp for 3 months to take some art classes, then to Paris, where he painted and lived with Theo for 2 years, then to paint in the south of France, first Arles, then the asylum in Saint-Remy, then finally north of Paris to Auvers-sur-Oise, where he died. He was always on the move, mostly for work, though restlessness was a factor too. He also moved to escape harsh winters or to seek a better environment for his work and health. Vincent's Jupiter in Sagittarius is well dignified as a domicile lord and in mutual reception with his sectmate Saturn as a term lord. I'll have more to say about Saturn later. Jupiter's not in the same hemisphere as its day sect lord, the Sun, but otherwise its accidental sect dignity is good. Vincent's Sagittarius moon is ruled by the domicile lord, Jupiter, the opposite and insect benefic, and has only a bit of face dignity because of its reception with stern Saturn from the opposite sect, so not much essential dignity at all. She's in the opposite hemisphere from the sun, which is good, but she's weakened by being in a day chart and in a masculine fire sign, which makes the gentle feminine moon feel rushed. The moon is associated with mother, and though you'll see lots of articles about how cheerful Vincent's mother was, that's actually not the case, according to Vincent's biographers Stephen Nafee and Gregory White Smith. His mother Anna was moody, something of an alarmist, and often anxious and worried. She believed in keeping busy to ward off depression and negative thoughts, a trait she passed on to her eldest son, Vincent. She wasn't physically affectionate with any of her 6 children, but it was obvious Theo was her and her husband's golden child, and Vincent was a huge disappointment. She was also an amateur painter and gave Vincent his first drawing lessons when he was a child and encouraged his artistic pursuits, reflecting Jupiter moon as teacher mother. She threw away most of his artworks, though. Anna van Gogh instilled in her 6 offspring the importance of walking outside in nature every day and maintaining close family ties. In fact, she so insisted on close family connections that her children found it difficult to separate and move away. What's not so great about Vincent's moon and Jupiter is that they're in his unfortunate 6th house, which is in aversion to the ascendant. But just like Pisces and Aries, the signs Sagittarius and Cancer do share equal rising times. So through the rule of contra-antitia, they avoid the harms of aversion. Moon can see her first whole sign house and manage its affairs. The problem is Vincent's Sag moon is closely quincunx his Cancer ascendant. The medical astrologer Judith Hill says the quincunx and yaws are associated with disease or illness, and so is the 6th house. In Vincent's case, he was often poorly nourished. During his religious phase, he starved himself. He also went without a coat in freezing weather, forms of self-chastisement to punish himself for his failures. As an artist, he often lacked money for food, mostly because he didn't manage his finances well. He also overexerted himself to the point of exhaustion. My constitution would be good enough, he told Theo, if I hadn't had to fast for a long time. But again and again, it was a question of either fasting or working less, and as far as possible, I chose the first. The 6th is the house of health, bad health, like from accidents, illness, or disease, mental and physical, in addition to service and daily routines. Jupiter, the benefic house lord, would try to mitigate some of the bad stuff here, as it did with the midheaven in the 9th whole sign house, which it also rules. In that case, Jupiter Moon helped with Vincent's job prospects through various family ties. Vincent's Sagittarius Jupiter Moon aspects also came through in his love of literature. The moon describes what we need to make us feel nurtured and secure. He told Theo, I have a more or less irresistible passion for books, and I have a need continually to educate myself, to study if you like, precisely as I need to eat my bread. The ever-hopeful Jupiter also helped buoy his spirits in the worst of times, giving him an optimistic outlook, as is common with fire energy, though sometimes it was often a front to mask his failure and shame. His optimism flagged some as his mental illness worsened at the end of his life, but at the beginning of his artistic career, he told Theo, I also believe that it may happen that one succeeds and one mustn't begin by despairing. Even if one loses here and there, and even if one sometimes feels a sort of decline, the point is nevertheless to revive and have courage, even though things don't turn out as one first thought. Through all his many failures, disappointments, setbacks, and troubles, Vincent consistently picked himself up and kept going. The 6th also gets a bad rap as the house of drudgery because it's associated with service and mundane tasks and habits of daily living that serve the 10th house of career, which it trines. The moon here works hard, as Vincent did constantly. He also yearned to be of service. He lamented to Theo when he wrote to him from the Borinage in despair about his professional life, right before he decided to become an artist. My torment is none other than this. What could I be good for? Couldn't I serve and be useful in some way? I'm good for something, even so. What then could I be of use? For what could I serve? There's something within me, so what is it? Jupiter, planet of abundance and exuberance, conjunct and parallel his moon, would contribute to his emotional highs and lows and to overdoing habitual behaviors, in Vincent's case, working, drinking, and smoking his pipe. So the moon conjunct and parallel Jupiter in Sag manifested in his work and career mostly as opportunities through family connections and underscored his great love for books and learning and for his love of nature and the countryside. They made him crave a life of service or devotion to a higher cause, which he ultimately fulfilled through art. But the moon and Jupiter also suffered because they were saddled with a conjunction and parallel to the malefic south node. Vincent's moon is closely conjunct and parallel the tail of the dragon. In Vedic or Indian astrology, both nodes are considered malefics, shadow planets that bring change, uncertainty, confusion, and delusion. In both Indian and Western astrology, they're associated with karma, with the south node representing talents and habits accrued in past lives that no longer serve our growth. Instead of relying on them, we're supposed to move toward the north node, representing new skills and talents needed in this life. The south node is said to have a weakening energy on any planet it touches, while the north node strengthens the quality of the planet it conjuncts. Vincent's south node in the 6th and north node in the 12th puts the dragon on his axis of service and suffering, the two most unfortunate houses in an astrological chart. Health issues and habitual daily routines for the 6th, and renunciation, suffering, hospitals, institutions, hidden enemies, self-undoing, and the unconscious and dreams for the 12th. They're dark houses where the malefics find joy, Mars in the 6th, Saturn in the 12th. Having planets in these houses doesn't condemn someone to a miserable life, but it does ensure themes of service, health, or suffering will dominate when planets there are activated. Vincent's moon, ruler of his Cancer ascendant, was disadvantaged in the 6th, conjunct and parallel the south node. For most of his life as an adult, Vincent ate poorly and drank and smoked too much. He indulged his bad habits and didn't take good care of his health at all. He complained of persistent stomach ailments most of his life. Vincent's poor health habits also affected his fragile mental condition. Dr. Dietrich Blumer, in a 2002 article called The Illness of Vincent van Gogh in the American Journal of Psychiatry, reviews Vincent's depression and psychotic episodes and the 30-plus diagnoses that at least 150 physicians have made over the years. Dr. Bloomer focuses on the temporal lobe epilepsy theory, exacerbated by Vincent's use of absinthe, a licorice-flavored green drink with a high alcohol content favored by a lot of French artists at the time and said to be hallucinogenic. Temporal lobe epilepsy was the diagnosis Vincent's own doctors gave him. Dr. Bloomer thinks Vincent likely suffered an early brain injury as well, probably at birth, and he also exhibited bipolar behavior. Vincent's family is full of relatives on both parents' sides who suffered from mental illness. His sister Will, in fact, was institutionalized for most of her adult life for schizophrenia. Vincent's biographers, Nafee and Smith, also believe Vincent suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy. They think he had syphilis as well, and that his health would have degenerated even more because of that if he had lived longer. Temporal lobe epilepsy typically occurs around the hippocampus, which is part of the limbic system, or brain structures located in the forebrain on both sides of the thalamus. They're called temporal lobes because they're located at the head's temples. The limbic system is involved in motivation, emotion, learning, and memory. The temporal lobes process emotions and sensory information for hearing and seeing primarily, then turn that info into words and speech. The hippocampus converts short-term into long-term memory and also involves spatial memory and navigation. After each attack, Vincent would lose his ability to speak and write for a time, and he didn't know where he was. He'd also black out during his mental attacks and not remember what he'd done. When he sliced off his left ear in 1888, some speculate he may have been trying to stop the voices or ringing or buzzing sounds in his ear, which can accompany epileptic attacks. When he was in the hospital after this episode, he told Theo that he experienced both auditory and visual hallucinations. With me, it was both the sight and the hearing at the same time, which, according to what Ray said one day, is usual at the beginning of epilepsy. The moon rules the limbic and lymphatic systems, body fluids, the stomach and breasts, and the body's overall general cycles, such as eating and sleeping patterns. Vincent's out-of-sect moon, conjunct and parallel the debilitating south node, and quincunx his ascendant degree from the unfortunate sixth house, fits, from an astrological view, with the physical and mental problems he experienced, though of course it's not the only aspect or planet that affected his complex medical condition, though it does seem to be a major player. Vincent's mother always suspected him of not being quite right in the head. After hearing about Vincent's first breakdown when he was in the hospital in Arles after he sliced off his ear, she recalled when Mr. Van Gogh wanted to bring Vincent as a nerve patient to see a doctor in The Hague. This is when his pa wanted to institutionalize Vincent, but Vincent refused to go, so his father went alone. Mrs. Van Gogh told Theo, "And the doctor said, from what I now hear, something is missing or wrong in the little brain. Poor thing," his mother said. "I believe he was always ill, and what he and we have suffered are the consequences of it." His mother never visited Vincent in the hospital or later in the asylum, though she traveled all the time to visit her other children. She seemed to hold her husband's early death against Vincent, and though Vincent wrote several letters to his mother in the last couple years of his life, apologizing for fighting with his father, she skipped Vincent's funeral, as did everyone else in the family except Theo. Vincent did fulfill his moon contra-parallel his north node in the 12th by striking out for new territory through his art. In the last 2 years of his life in the south of France, Vincent was so intent on painting to focus his mind, he just made the art he felt like creating in the moment. And by doing that, he found his own vibrant, unique style, which the public responded to positively. Vincent said to Theo early in his artistic career in 1883, "Art is something which, although produced by human hands, is not wrought by the hands alone, but wells up from a deeper source in our soul. My sympathies in the literary as well as the artistic sphere are drawn most strongly to those artists in whom I see the soul most at work." He ensured his own art revealed not just the beauty of nature or the truth as he saw it, of the figures he painted, but his own passionate feelings for his subjects as well. His soul, marrying the spirituality, deep feeling, and devotion to service of his 6th house south node and moon with his 12th house north node's imagination, resulting in public acclaim and success that he began to experience only once he was institutionalized. Now let's look at Vincent's Venus in Pisces parallel and conjunct his Mars in Pisces in his Placidus 10th and whole sign 9th house. Mars rules the Aries 11th in the Placidus system, but can't do much to help the planets in Taurus there, Pluto, Uranus, and Saturn, because that's his sign of detriment. Toward the end of his life, Vincent wanted to organize a studio of the South in Arles, a kind of brotherhood of painters who would live and work together. But the only one he could get to join him was Paul Gauguin, and that's only because Theo agreed to pay his debts, his moving expenses, and a stipend. And even then, Gauguin just stayed 2 months, driven away, he told Theo, by Vincent's temperament. Exalted Venus in Pisces rules Taurus in the whole sign 11th, and so also Pluto, Uranus, and Saturn. Pisces sextiles Taurus, so this whole sign ruler would do her best to help Vincent here. He didn't really have any close friends, but those he called friends were mostly work-related, other painters who visited and corresponded with him, or people who modeled for him. Taurus on the 11th reflected Vincent's preference for the French Barbizon and Dutch Hague schools of painters, groups of artists who focused on painting peasants and beautiful scenes of nature outside in the open air. The other sign Venus rules is Libra, on the Placidus 5th and the whole sign 4th house. Because Pisces avoids the harms of aversion through antitia with Libra, meaning Pisces and Libra are of equal power or light, since the sun shines the same number of hours during the day when the sun's in those signs, Vincent's Venus in Pisces can see her Libra house and manage its affairs. However, just as with the 11th Taurus house, being parallel and conjunct Mars means Venus was hampered by his irritability, impatience, and raw energy. This is obvious in Vincent's whole sign Libra house, where he fought with his parents constantly, mostly his father. As a child and an adult, he spent much of his time at home, when in the house, reading, engrossed in the world of ideas, fitting for an air sign on the cusp. He also decorated his room wherever he was living with dozens of art prints he collected and admired. Also, one of the subjects he painted often were homes, peasant cottages, farmhouses, and the places where he lived. In the Placidus system, Libra is on his 5th house of romance, with Scorpio intercepted, though Mars-ruled Scorpio is on the 5th in the whole sign system. Let's take a look at Vincent's romances, affected by both his Venus and Mars. In 1872, when he was 19 years old and working in the art dealership in The Hague, Vincent became infatuated with Caroline Hannebeek, who refused his hand in marriage. He seems to have taken refuge in brothels after that, which was not seemly for a staff member of a reputable art firm, let alone a minister's son. So since he wasn't that great with customers anyway, he was shipped off to the London office, which was more of a warehouse with no customer-facing gallery. In London, he fell in love with the daughter of his landlady, though some say it was the almost 60-year-old landlady herself, but that appears to have been a mistake first made by his sister and then compounded by Theo's wife Jo and taken as gospel thereafter. In any case, Eugenie rejected him too, as she was secretly engaged to someone else in the boarding house. Vincent fell into a depression after that and lost interest in selling art. He also became increasingly more religious and swore off brothels and sex. His next major romance was in Eton in the summer of 1881 when he was 28 and again living with his parents after he'd declared himself an artist. He became infatuated with his first cousin, Kay Voss, who was staying with Vincent's parents. She was widowed with a young son. Vincent proposed to her, but she answered no, nay, never, which he took as maybe. So he pursued her relentlessly, hoping to change her mind. She and her son moved back to her father's house in Amsterdam, where Vincent flooded her with letters, pleading with her to give him a chance. She never replied, so he showed up on her doorstep in Amsterdam and demanded to see her. His uncle Stricker, Kay's father, said, "Your persistence is sickening," whereupon Vincent held his hand over the flame of a lamp and said, "Let me see her for as long as I hold my hand in the flame." But his uncle blew the lamp out and said, "You shall not see her." Vincent's next romance was in The Hague, where he moved after his pa kicked him out of the house. For a year and a half, he lived with Seen, a former prostitute, and her young daughter, taking them in when she was pregnant with another man's child. He made many drawings and paintings of her and her children, called the Seen series. His family and associates disapproved of this scandalous, immoral relationship, but Vincent retorted, "What is more cultured, more sensitive, more manly, to forsake a woman or to take on a forsaken one?" Most people just iced him out, but his loyal brother Theo stuck by him. Then, in June 1882, just before Seen had her baby, Vincent was hospitalized for a few weeks with gonorrhea. His father visited him in the hospital and gave him some money and told Theo, "He remains singular and I have no great expectations. There is in him an inclination towards the lower classes, and sometimes a person can enter into an improper connection out of a perversity or a sense of desolation." The relationship with Seen finally ended when Theo, who was ill and in shaky financial straits himself, told his brother he couldn't possibly keep supporting him and these 3 extra people, as he was also supporting their ma and pa, little sister Wilhelmine, and his own mistress, Marie. So he told Vincent, either stay with the woman and her kids and get a job to support them, or continue being an artist with his, Theo's, financial help, but away from Seen and her kids in a less expensive town. In the end, Vincent chose art, saying, "It's my understanding that work is more directly duty than even the woman, and that the former mustn't suffer for the sake of the latter. But one has divided feelings and would like to do both, which cannot be in the circumstances, both because of the money and, more than that, because she can't be counted on." His next romance was in the summer of 1884, when Vincent was once again living with his parents, now in Noonan, a mostly Catholic small town. He took up with the next-door neighbor's daughter, Margot Begeman. He proposed to her and she accepted, but her family didn't want Margot to have anything to do with him. In her despair, Margot tried to kill herself with poison while out walking with Vincent. He made her stick her finger down her throat and vomit, then rushed her to her brother, who fetched the doctor. She was whisked away to Utrecht to recover and stayed there for several months. It was yet another scandal Pa and Ma had to bear. His father wrote to Theo, "But there's no getting away from it. Because of what Vincent asked Margot, our relationship with people changed. They don't come see us because they don't want to meet him." While still in Noonan, toward the end of 1885, a few months after his father had died, the town priest, who lived next door to Vincent's studio, accused Vincent of getting one of his peasant models pregnant, Gordina de Groot. It was her family that's pictured in The Potato Eaters. He had painted her about 20 times. She came often to his studio alone, so when she got pregnant, the priest jumped to conclusions and led a smear campaign against Vincent and offered his parishioners money not to model for him. Vincent wasn't the father, but the priest managed to stir up the town against him nevertheless. It was one of the reasons he moved to Antwerp. Vincent also supposedly had a romantic relationship in Paris with an Italian woman, Agostina Segatori, a former painter's model, and when Vincent met her, the owner of the restaurant and cabaret Le Tambourine, a hotspot for artists and writers. She was divorced and had an illegitimate child. The artist Emile Bernard said Vincent would woo her with daily paintings of flowers in exchange for free meals. But Vincent actually hung his paintings on the walls of her cafe, hoping to make a sale. Biographers Navy and Smith don't think she herself had intimate relations with Vincent, but they speculate that she may have pimped out younger women to him, since her establishment was probably also a brothel. The place went bankrupt, though, and Vincent got back only a few of his paintings. The rest were sold in batches of 10 to pay off her debt. He was upset, but said, "I still feel affection for her, and I hope she still feels some for me." The aim of Vincent's romances, and indeed most of his friendships, was, according to biographers Nafy and Smith, following Umberto Nogueira's psychological study of Van Gogh in 1967, to form surrogate families as substitutes for his own failed family relationships. Astrologically, this checks out, since the idea of romantic partners/surrogate family combines the 4th and 5th whole sign houses, home and romance, ruled by Venus conjunct and parallel Mars. Relationships and/or seductions also took place in his studio, which was often where he lived, again combining Venus and Mars-ruled houses. Inevitably, though, his romances, like all his relationships, suffered from the negative influence of his out-of-sect malefic. In 1878, in Amsterdam, when he was almost 25, studying for the theology college entrance exam, his Uncle Cor asked him if he was attracted to beautiful women, and Vincent replied, "I would have more feeling for and would prefer to be involved with one who was ugly or old or impoverished or in some way unhappy, who had acquired understanding and a soul through experience of life and trial and error or sorrow." It's been pointed out that most, if not all, of his relationships were with older women and/or mothers. Caroline was just a year older than Vincent. Eugenie was probably 4 years older and lived with her mother, the boarding house matron, herself a widow. So that was a package deal for a ready-made family, as was a union with the cousin Kay Voss, 7 years older, a widow with a young son, and also Sean Hornick, the ex-prostitute, 3 years older, pregnant and with a daughter. He succeeded in creating a substitute family with her, which also served as revenge on Kay and religious parents, but he was sad as well since he paid Sean to stay with him. The neighbor woman, Margot Begeman, was 12 years older than Vincent, as was Agostina Segatori. All these romantic interests would fit his preference for women who were older or who had suffered in their lives, as the 25-year-old Vincent told his uncle. Nafy and Smith write that Vincent was also romantically infatuated with Madame Ginou, the married wife of the Café Dive Bar owner in Arles. She was 5 years older than Vincent and seems to have persistently avoided him as well. Maybe Vincent had a Freudian mother fixation, trying to capture with these older women the weak or missing bond with his own disapproving mother. Or maybe it was just a manifestation of his Venus in Pisces, giving him a rescue complex, attracting him to suffering women and wanting to save them. And then there's sorrowful, stern Saturn as Venus's term lord and ruler of his 7th house. Saturn also rules his marriage point, his sun-moon midpoint, at 15 Aquarius in his intense 8th house. That's a lot of Saturn energy affecting his choice of a partner. Both Mars and Venus in Pisces were aspected by their sign ruler, the great benefic Jupiter, also ruler of the MC, albeit via a square from the 6th, with all the health issues that entailed, including gonorrhea and syphilis, but which nevertheless helped direct Vincent's energy and passion into his 2 main professions, religion and art. With Mars, Jupiter would ramp up his evangelical zeal, and with exalted Venus, his optimistic view of romance, at least at the beginning of the relationships. Vincent's idealistic notions about love mostly came from a couple of books he read as a young man by the French writer Jules Michelet, L'amour et la femme, about how 2 people become one, forming a divine unity because of their love and devotion to one another. Vincent's famous drawing of scene called Sorrow features an inscription from Michelet's La Femme, which translated means, "How can there be on earth a woman alone?" Like many men of the period, Vincent took refuge in brothels, where he paid for the company of women, since he had such terrible trouble forming intimate romances on his own, given his quarrelsome temperament, his preference for wearing shabby clothes, and his lack of income from a profession. He confessed to Theo, "I'm losing the desire for marriage and children, and at times I'm quite melancholy to be like that at 35, when I ought to feel quite differently. And sometimes I blame this damn painting." Other times he talked about how creativity is not just limited to producing children. "I can't do without something greater than myself, which is my life, the power to create. And if frustrated in this power physically, we try to create thoughts instead of children. In that way, we're part of humanity all the same." Vincent may have consistently bombed out in the love and close friendship department, but his deep passion and love for nature, born of his exalted Venus, conjunct and parallel Mars, burst forth in his glorious paintings, especially those in the last 2 years of his life, filled with bold colors and dynamic shapes, captivating generations of art lovers to this day. Now let's look at Vincent's Mercury in Aries parallel his Uranus in Taurus. Like his sun Pluto, Mercury and Uranus make no aspect to each other by zodiacal longitude. Uranus added inspiration to his thinking, as well as nervous energy and an independent streak. In the fixed sign of Taurus, it also added stubbornness. With the quick wing-footed Mercury in Aries, this aspect explains Vincent's ability to master his craft quickly, with a unique style, being mostly self-taught. Early on, he had a local carpenter and blacksmith build him a perspective frame. He ended up with a few of them in different sizes. This was a device used by Renaissance artists that Vincent adopted because he said it enables one to draw at lightning speed, and once the lines are fixed, to paint at lightning speed. Vincent's Mercury in Aries, ruled by energetic Mars, was all about speed. He was most impressed by artists who painted, as he said, all in one go. On excursions to Amsterdam and Antwerp to visit museums, he said, "What particularly struck me when I saw the old Dutch paintings again is that they were usually painted quickly. These great masters, as far as possible, just put it straight down and didn't come back to it so very much. Paint in one go," he said, "as far as possible in one go." Before this, he fussed a lot over paintings and redid them constantly. But once he saw that it was possible to paint quickly and well, he was all in. He managed in 10 years, his entire career as an artist, to produce almost 900 paintings. That's not counting the more than 1,100 drawings and sketches, and a few lithographs as well. In the last 2 years of his life alone, in the south of France, while he was dealing with his terrifying mental attacks, he made over 400 paintings, with 74 completed in the final 2+ months of his life. These are the masterpieces now hanging in museums all over the world, so he definitely mastered the art of painting all in one go. Vincent's natal Mercury was stationary when he was born. It went retrograde on April 1st, right after midnight, so it was a very strong planet for him. It's no wonder he was a prodigious painter and letter writer. He wrote over 2,000 letters, of which 903 survive online and in book collections. He wrote more than 650 letters to his brother Theo alone, who thankfully was a little pack rat and kept everything. His sister Will and some of his painter friends also kept a few of his letters. So we have a great resource for all the trials and tribulations he went through, as well as what he was reading, working on, thinking about, and obsessing over every day. Though Vincent's Mercury has some good accidental dignity, being at the top of his chart, it has no essential dignity at all, meaning it's Peregrine, a wanderer, a nomad, with no power or resources of its own to provide for itself. So Vincent's Mercury is at the mercy of his various rulers. Mars is his sign ruler, and from Pisces makes an uncomfortable inconjunct aspect to Mercury, so that the interface there is scratchy. Mercury's expression is going to take on martial qualities, imbued with aggression and fighting. By the way, his Mercury is also exactly conjunct Black Moon Lilith at 25 Aries, which contributed to his intense and unconventional expression by making him fearless about calling out hypocrisies and speaking uncomfortable truths. The in-haze Aries Sun is Mercury's exaltation and triplicity lord, but the unaspected Sun's moon Kai issues and its contra-parallel to Pluto brought problems as well as benefits. Saturn in Taurus was Mercury's term lord, defining the boundaries or rules and regulations for Mercury to follow. Term lords have been widely described as like lower-level managers. So how would Saturn, the day-sect malefic, manage night-sect Mercury? Vincent's Mercury in Aries is in the sign of Saturn's fall, so Saturn's not going to be well disposed to help any planet in that sign. But much depends on Saturn's condition. Like the Sun, Saturn makes no zodiacal aspects by degree to any other planet, not only via longitude, but none by declination either. And if we did allow a wider orb for sextiles, more than the 3 degrees my software program defines, the Saturn-Neptune sextile in Vincent's chart would in fact be further testimony supporting his penchant for religious-themed self-reproach, denying himself basic needs to punish himself for his shortcomings and failures. Excluding Neptune, though, Saturn is even more of a wild horse in Vincent's chart than the Sun. What's more, when we look at sect dignity, we see that Saturn, like Vincent's Sun, is also Moon Kai. Saturn, a day-sect planet, is in the sign of Taurus, ruled by Venus, a night-sect planet, who herself is in Pisces, ruled by Jupiter, a day-sect planet. So there's that double crossing of sect boundaries again. Moon Kai, remember, makes the planet feel like it's constantly under attack. Vincent's Saturn would be hypersensitive to criticism about his authority or expertise. Saturn, as Mercury's term lord, would also make things difficult for Vincent regarding how he communicated with superiors or experts, and make it difficult for him to express himself as an expert, since he'd lack confidence and be ever suspicious and paranoid about possible betrayals. We've already seen Vincent's trouble with authorities due to the Sun-Pluto aspect, and here again is yet another testimony. The unaspected Moon Kai Saturn in the fixed Earth sign of Taurus underscored Vincent's stubbornness, workaholic tendencies, and his preoccupation with manifesting something physical. Saturn, the stern taskmaster, planet of discipline, and father time, acted like a hard-driving boss in Vincent's chart, ever aware of the passage of time and the need to produce. As Vincent told Theo at the beginning of his painting career, art demands persistent work in spite of everything, and unceasing observation. He also said, I have to try twice as hard to make up for lost time because I began later than the others. Saturn was in his 11th house, and Vincent constantly compared himself to his art school-trained painter friends, trying to learn from them, while also downplaying their professional techniques, painfully aware of his own amateur status, arguing that passion was even more important than technique. Saturn is also the planet of shoulds, reproaching those who stray from the rules. Vincent rejected conventional norms and many social niceties, probably due to the influence of upstart Uranus in the same sign and that Black Moon Lilith conjunct his Mercury. But he was a strong believer in doing right by one's conscience, and he could be very self-righteous. Theo told his wife, he, Vincent, is unable not to remark on things he sees that are not as they ought to be, and this often sows conflict. When he finally took charge of his life at age 27 and declared himself an artist, it was a major assertion of his own authority in terms of his life path. He told Theo, I couldn't tell you how happy I feel to have taken up drawing again. It had already been on my mind for a long time, but I always saw the thing as impossible and beyond my reach. Years later, in June 1888, he told Emile Bernard, I feel that my duty is to subordinate my life to painting. That's his unaspected Saturn speaking, Mercury's term lord. Adding to his troubles, Mercury has no sect dignity either, meaning he's ex conditione, a Latin term coined by the astrologer Robert Hand in his 1995 booklet, Night and Day, Planetary Sect in Astrology. This means that Mercury, as a night sect planet because he rose after the Sun, is not comfortable in any of the 3 sect categories he finds himself because they're all for day sect planets. So Mercury is not well equipped to perform his duties for the houses he rules with optimal success. Since Vincent's Mercury is both Peregrine and ex conditione, it's no wonder he felt misunderstood, rejected for his liberal, free-thinking beliefs, and like an exile everywhere he went. Still, Mercury does have the accidental dignity of being in the Placidus whole sign 10th house, which was evident in his jobs: a clerk in the art dealership, buying and selling and organizing artworks, a teacher of young boys, a bookseller, an evangelist writing sermons based on biblical passages. He had trouble with the dialect and the Borinage, though, and his congregants were illiterate and found him strange. And finally, an artist, which required developing drawing and painting techniques and mastering brushstrokes. Mercury's stationary status was his superpower, giving him considerable persuasive skills, a talent for arguing, and in Aries, the ability to write and paint quickly. However, since Mercury was about to go retrograde in this chart, it probably contributed to delays, false starts, and misunderstandings in Vincent's career. His Mercury's trine with Jupiter gave him a facility with foreign languages, and with Moon, his night sect luminary, the trine helped him express his deep and changeable emotions. Mercury's parallel with Uranus, well, that's kind of borderline between a benefit and a challenge. Because while it made him a unique thinker and a visionary painter, he was so unconventional that his family and most people who met him found him too strange and difficult to be around. Vincent's Mercury in Aries can see his Placidus Virgo 4th house because of the rule of Anticia, but it's Peregrine, which fits with the fact that he never had a permanent home of his own. The parallel to Uranus added instability to his home life, with sudden comings and goings. Placidus' 4th house Virgo also emphasized the earth element, the gardens and countryside and natural surroundings he was drawn to wherever he found himself living, as well as all the books he must have carted around with him everywhere, since he was widely read in 4 languages: Dutch, French, English, and German. Vincent's brother Theo, represented by the Virgo 3rd whole sign house, was, as I said, the recipient of the vast majority of Vincent's letters. Also, Theo's Jupiter was on Vincent's Mercury, which greatly enhanced the positive brotherly feelings between them, and Theo's financial generosity, as it was only through his years-long patronage that Vincent was able to develop his career as an artist. They also got along better when they had some distance from each other. Vincent said Theo was my best friend, for he and I are more friends than brothers. And he told Theo, "I don't really have any friends except for you," which was true when he wrote that, since he was living with Scene at the time and most people had shunned him. When Vincent moved in with Theo in Paris for 2 years, starting in March 1886, the letters between them of course dried up, but it's clear there were problems. Theo's friend and future brother-in-law wrote to his parents, "His brother, Vincent, doesn't have any social graces at all. He rows with everyone, so Theo has a great deal to put up with because of him." Theo wrote to their sister Will during this time, bemoaning the difficulties he was having with Vincent. "No one wants to come by anymore because it always leads to rows, and he's so filthy and slovenly that the household looks anything but inviting. It's as if there are 2 people in him, the one marvelously gifted, sensitive, and gentle, and the other self-loving and unfeeling. They appear by turns, so that first one hears one way of reasoning and then the other, and always with arguments both for and against. It's a pity that he's his own worst enemy, because he doesn't just make life difficult for others, but for himself as well." They patched things up after this, but clearly it was not easy living with Vincent. The other house Mercury rules is Gemini on the 12th. Mercury is sextile to the North Node there. The 12th, remember, is the house of institutions, suffering, hospitals, unseen enemies, self-undoing, and also dreams and the unconscious. The North Node rules the masses, and new territory or skills to be developed for material success. In late July 1888, when he was in Arles, where he moved after living with Theo in Paris, Vincent's solar arc Mercury first went into Gemini, his 12th whole sign house, joining solar arc Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn, who were already there. As he worked nonstop, he sustained himself mostly on alcohol, tobacco, and coffee. Uranus in aspect with Mercury can bring mental strain. Given that he was outside all day in the blazing sun in Arles painting and not eating or sleeping well, he was bound to have some kind of health crisis. In early July 1888, Vincent wrote about his marathon day of painting. "My brain is so tired that I become totally distracted and incapable of a whole lot of ordinary things." He talked about the mental labor of balancing the 6 essential colors: red, blue, yellow, orange, lilac, green, work and dry calculation, in which one's mind is extremely stretched, where you have to think of 1,000 things at the same time in a single half hour. Afterwards, the only thing that comforts and distracts is to stun oneself by taking a stiff drink or smoking very heavily. He talked often of dreams at this time, and eternity too, 12th house themes. At the end of September 1888, he wrote about having a tremendous need for, shall I say the word, for religion, so I go outside at night to paint the stars. This is when he painted Starry Night over the Rhone and his other famous night scene, Café Terrace. He talked about the stars as representing hope and as places we go to when we die. He said, "The sight of the stars always makes me dream in as simple a way as the black spots on the map, representing towns and villages, makes me dream. Just as we take the train to go to Tarascon or Rouen, we take death to go to a star." After many, many delays, Paul Gauguin finally arrived in late October to room with Vincent in his yellow house, after months of Vincent pleading with him to visit and paint together. Gauguin was haughty, egotistic, and arrogant, and they often argued. Vincent's description of one of their conversations sounds like Mercury-Uranus overload. He told Theo, "The discussion is excessively electric. We sometimes emerge from it with tired minds, like an electric battery after it's run down." After a couple months, Gauguin notified Theo that he would be moving out, ending Vincent's dream of a studio of the South. Gauguin said, "Vincent and I can absolutely not live side by side without trouble, as a result of incompatibility of temperament." At this point, Vincent's solar arc Mars was exactly conjunct his natal Pluto at 0 Taurus for a battle of wills and a possible violent event, and his solar arc Saturn was at 20 Gemini, opposite his natal moon, indicating depression, loneliness, and loss. Vincent's solar arc Mercury, as I mentioned earlier, was at 0 Gemini in his 12th house of hidden enemies and self-undoing. Something was going to give. On December 23rd, a Sunday, Vincent and Gauguin got into a violent argument. Vincent sliced off his left ear with a razor in a psychotic rage after Gauguin announced he was leaving. That's Gauguin's version anyway, which he gave years later, so questions remain, especially since Vincent told his doctors he couldn't remember anything about the episode. The Van Gogh expert Martin Bailey believes that Vincent received a telegram from Theo that morning announcing his wedding engagement, which sent Vincent into a downward spiral of fear, as he had perceived this as threatening to his livelihood and to his close relationship with his brother. Fear of abandonment, writes Bailey, was the probable trigger for the mutilation. And now Gauguin was leaving him too. Vincent spent a few weeks in and out of the hospital in Arles. His neighbors, meanwhile, fearful for their safety, petitioned the authorities to force Vincent out of his yellow house and into a mental hospital where he could get treatment. He suffered more terrifying psychotic episodes over the next few months, each one taking longer to recover from than the last. In May 1889, Vincent voluntarily admitted himself into a more secluded asylum in Saint-Remy, north of Arles. He stayed there for a year, during which time Theo and his wife had a son they named Vincent after his uncle. There in Saint-Remy, looking out from the barred windows of his hospital room, secluded from the outside world and too frightened for the first 2 months to even venture off the grounds for fear of having another attack, he painted the famous Starry Night in June 1889, a painting some say is a product of his fevered imagination, or maybe a rendition of a frightening hallucination. But Gloria Fossey, author of the book In Search of Van Gogh, notes that Vincent's painting seems to illustrate the Whirlpool Galaxy, discovered in 1773, and that Vincent, an avid star watcher, would probably have known about it through illustrations and publications he read. Vincent told Theo Starry Night was comparable in sentiment to the kinds of paintings Gauguin and Bernard were doing, what he called consolatory paintings. But Theo didn't much like Starry Night, thinking it was too symbolic for the current marketplace. Vincent's longest psychotic break came between February and April 1890, with terrifying hallucinations, all followed by amnesia. April 1890 was when solar arc Saturn moved to 22 Gemini, conjunct his north node in the 12th house and square his midheaven. It was a time of even more productivity. But Saturn also rules Vincent's 8th house of death, and in fact he would be dead in July. In May, though, he left the asylum and moved to Auvers-sur-Oise, a small artsy town north of Paris, where Theo had found him a doctor who had also treated the painter Pissarro for his mental condition. With Mercury ruling his letter writing, his painting techniques, and his intellect in the 10th house of career, linked by parallel to Uranus, the planet of genius, individuality, revolution, and freedom, in Taurus, the sign of beauty, nature, and fine art, it's no wonder Vincent shook up the world of painting with his unique, bold, energetic, and colorful style. And though he wasn't a huge success in his own time, he was becoming better known. His paintings were getting positive attention in important exhibitions, and he also had his first and only sale while he was alive. Art critics were even giving him rave reviews. Uranus and Taurus in the 11th house of friends and organizations brought Vincent into contact with other so-called eccentric painters, namely the avant-garde Impressionists and Post-Impressionists in Paris, who were mostly looked down upon by the public at the time. Through developing his own singular style, he helped move the art of painting toward expressionism. His Mercury parallel Uranus added a mental quality to his passionate paintings. The duty of the painter, Vincent said, is to study nature in depth and to use all his intelligence to put his feelings into his work so that it becomes comprehensible to others. Vincent van Gogh's work now fetches some of the highest prices ever paid for paintings. His vase with 15 sunflowers sold on his birthday, March 30th, in 1987, for £24.75 million, around $106.4 million today. That was the first modern painting to sell for such a huge sum. The highest priced paintings before then were always by the old masters. His painting Irises sold for $53.9 million, also in 1987, around $100 million today. And in May 1990, his portrait of Dr. Gachet sold at Christie's auction house for $82.5 million, another record price for one of his paintings. The Seated Zouave, painted in 1888, was sold in 2019 for a reputed $300 million. Even 135 years after his death, Vincent's art is still popular and still celebrated by people of all ages all over the world. He said when he was starting out, "Although I don't know in advance what will be possible for me, nevertheless, I do hope to make some scratch yet in which there might be something human." I hope I've shown you that examining parallels and contraparallels can help call attention to and strengthen the most important testimonies in a chart, emphasizing longitudinal aspects and pointing to critical planetary connections that may not otherwise be evident. Thanks for watching Astromantic. See you in my Part 2 declination video about Trump.